Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a show where we'll provide you fresh insights into South Asia's geopolitical, strategic and security situation. Let's take a look at the headlines first. Baloch protest reaches Europe. Amsterdam rally demands release of Dr. Maharang Baloch. Kashmiri diaspora intensifies protest, demands withdrawal of Pakistani forces from POJK. And monsoon disaster leaves over a million people stranded across Bangladesh. The campaign against Pakistan's crackdown in Balochistan is gaining momentum beyond South Asia. Weeks after an anti-terrorism court in Quetta sentenced Baloch rights activist Dr. Maharang Baloch to life imprisonment, members of the Baloch diaspora have intensified protests across Europe. After demonstrations in London and Germany, Amsterdam has now become the latest stage for international criticism of Pakistan's handling of the Baloch issue. Protesters have accused Islamabad of suppressing peaceful dissent and demanded the immediate release of Baloch leaders. Our report.
The streets of Amsterdam echoed with slogans against Pakistan as members of the Baloch National Movement staged a demonstration outside the Pakistani embassy in the Dutch capital. Carrying Baloch flags and placards, protesters condemned the life imprisonment of Baloch Yakjehti Committee leader Dr. Maharang Baloch. The demonstrations is the latest in a series of overseas protests that have followed the June 22 verdict delivered by an anti-terrorism court in Quetta. Dr. Maharang Baloch, a medical doctor turned rights campaigner, has emerged as one of the most recognizable voices highlighting allegations of enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings and human rights violations in Pakistan's Balochistan province. Her conviction has drawn criticism from several international human rights organizations and UN experts who have questioned the fairness of the trial and the use of anti-terror laws against peaceful activists.
I'm here to talk about two Baloch leaders, Dr. Maharang Baloch and Sibghatullah Shahji. A few days ago, on 22nd June, an anti-terrorism court in Hudda Jail, Quetta, sentenced them to life imprisonment. They didn't bomb a building, they didn't hurt a soil. Their only crime was that speaking up for the people who have no voices.
The Baloch National Movement alleged that Pakistan's military establishment continues to tighten its grip over Balochistan while suppressing political activism through arrests and legal action. The protesters claimed that Baloch Yakjehti Committee, which has organized peaceful campaigns over alleged enforced disappearances and human rights concerns, has been systematically targeted. They argued that the life sentences handed to Dr. Maharang Baloch and Sibghatullah Shahji represent a wider crackdown on dissent in the province. Pakistan, however, maintains that the convictions stem from killing of a Frontier Corps personnel during a protest in Gwadar in July 2024. Authorities insist that the court followed due legal process, while rights groups have rejected that claim, describing the proceedings as lacking transparency and due process.
Few days ago, a notorious Pakistani infamous justice system, judiciary, under the command of the Pakistan Army, Pakistan intelligence agencies, awarded her the life sentence to her and to her other colleagues. So around the world, the peaceful activists, human rights defenders and organizations, political workers condemned this sentence and asked Pakistan that this is unjustified and the Baloch leaders must be released unconditionally, immediately.
In recent weeks, Similar rallies have been organized in London and Hanover, reflecting growing mobilization by the Baloch diaspora. Protest organizers say they are seeking greater international attention to what they describe as a worsening human rights situation in Balochistan. Independent UN experts have expressed concern over Dr. Mehrang Baloch's conviction, saying the case raises serious questions about fair trial standards and the alleged misuse of counter-terrorism legislation against human rights defenders. Amnesty International has also called for immediate release of the convicted activists.
I address to the United Nations, Amnesty International, and everyone who believes in freedom. We need you to look at what's happening in Balochistan. Don't look away. We ask you to take action right now. Speak up publicly. Call this trial what it is, an unfair, hidden process meant to silence the leaders. Demand their freedom. Pressurize the authorities to drop these charges and release Mehrang and Shaji immediately. Protect peaceful voices. Make it clear that anti-terrorism laws should not be used against peaceful human rights activists. You can lock up a person, but you cannot lock up the truth. We will not stop speaking, and we need the world to stand with us.
According to Pakistani prosecutors, the convictions relate to the violence that erupted during the Baloch Raji Machi gathering in Gwadar in July 2024, where a Frontier Corps personnel was killed. The prosecution accused Dr. Mehrang Baloch of inciting protesters, allegations both activists have denied. Their supporters argue that the rally was intended to raise concerns over alleged enforced disappearances and the charges are politically motivated. The verdict has further deepened the divide between Pakistan's security establishment and sections of Baloch civil society, with rights groups warning that continued legal action against peaceful activists could aggravate tensions in the restive province. With demonstrations now spreading from South Asia to major European capitals, the campaign surrounding Dr. Mehrang Baloch's imprisonment is steadily becoming an international issue. Whether this growing global pressure influences Pakistan's approach remains to be seen, but the protests suggest that the debate over Balochistan is increasingly moving beyond Pakistan's border.
Pakistan is facing mounting criticism over its handling of unrest in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. For the last several days, members of the Kashmiri diaspora have been continuing their sit-in outside the Pakistani consulate in Bradford, accusing Islamabad of escalating military repression in POJK. The protesters demanded the immediate withdrawal of Pakistani security forces, an end to alleged extrajudicial killings and state violence, and urged the international community to intervene over what they describe as a worsening human rights crisis. Our report. The protests may be taking place thousands of kilometers away from Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but the message from Bradford is unmistakable. For the fifth straight day, members of the Kashmiri diaspora gathered outside the Pakistani consulate, accusing Islamabad of turning POJK into a heavily militarized zone and demanding an immediate withdrawal of Pakistani security forces. Protesters alleged that instead of addressing public grievances through dialogue, Pakistan has responded with force, intimidation, and an increased military presence.
वहाँ के लोगों की बातों को सुना जाए। आज भी हमारा यही रोना है कि आज़ाद कश्मीर के अंदर पाकिस्तानी पैरामिलिट्री फोर्सेस वो जो जारियत, बर्बरियत और जुल्म की इंतहा कर रही हैं उसको बंद किया जाए, उन्हें वापस बुलाया जाए, आज़ाद कश्मीर का अमन व अमान बहाल किया जाए, वहाँ के लोगों की बातों को सुना जाए और उनके जो भी मुतालबात हैं उनके साथ बातचीत करके उनको हल किया जाए। जुल्म, जबर और बर्बरियत की बुनियाद पर आप नफरतें पैदा कर रहे हो, आप एक ऐसा खलीज पैदा कर रहे हो जो शायद जिसको वापस करीब न लाया जा सके। इसलिए पाकिस्तान के जो आला क़यादतें हैं उन तक हमारा ये पैगाम है, हम देते रहेंगे, इससे पहले भी दिया है कि आप के खिलाफ हमारी जिदोजहद हर दौर में जारी रहेगी उस वक्त तक जब तक इंसाफ का बोलबाला नहीं हो जाता, जब तक हमारे रियासत से आपके नापाक अज़ाइम का खात्मा नहीं हो जाता, जब तक आप हमारे लोगों की इज्जत नफ्स को बहाल नहीं करोगे, हम आपके खिलाफ अपनी जिदोजहद जारी रखेंगे।
The Bradford sit-in is the latest chapter in a movement that has steadily gained momentum over the past several weeks. Protest organizers say the demonstrations were triggered by Pakistan's alleged crackdown on a growing public rights movement in POJK. Earlier protests in Bradford and London had already accused Pakistani authorities of using excessive force, imposing restrictions on movement, carrying out detentions, and attempting to suppress dissent. Protesters have repeatedly appealed to the international community to investigate the allegations and ensure accountability. Addressing the gathering, Jammu Kashmir National Independence Alliance chairman Mahmood Kashmiri alleged that Pakistani forces had once again killed 4 Kashmiris and were attempting to crush what he described as a peaceful people's movement. He claimed that a shutdown was being observed across POJK with participation from women, children and civil society, arguing that the unrest reflected widespread public anger rather than an isolated protest.
हम पाकिस्तानी कौंसलेट ब्रैडफोर्ड के बाहर धरना देकर बैठे हुए हैं और आज एक बार फिर पाकिस्तान की जालिम फोर्सेस ने आज़ाद कश्मीर में हमारे 4 कश्मीरियों को शहीद कर दिया है और फोर्सेस की तादाद में इजाफा किया जा रहा है। हमारी पुरअमन तहरीक है और इस पुरअमन तहरीक को पाकिस्तान की कातिल फोर्सेस जो हैं वो जबर के तौर पर ख़त्म करना चाहती हैं, मगर ऐसा मुमकिन नहीं है। ये अवामी तहरीक है और अवामी तहरीक को ताकत और जबर के तौर पर ख़त्म नहीं किया जा सकता। अब भी वक्त है अमन का रास्ता तलाश किया जाए। अमन के रास्ते में ही सलामती है। अगर पाकिस्तान का हुक्मरान तबका ये समझता है कि वो कश्मीरियों की लाशें गिराकर वो अपने जो मकासद हैं उसमें कामयाब हो जाएगा, तो ये मुमकिन नहीं है। इस वक्त पूरा आज़ाद कश्मीर जो है, पूरा आज़ाद कश्मीर शटर डाउन पहिया जाम है, इसमें ख्वातीन और बच्चे शामिल हैं।
Meanwhile, anger was also visible inside POJK. At a gathering in Rawalakot, speakers questioned the legality of the military's actions and accused Pakistan's establishment of using violence to silence dissent. Protesters argued that no constitutional or legal framework could justify the deaths of civilians or the use of force against peaceful demonstrators.
कोई दुनिया है, कोई कानून नहीं है। किसी किताब ने अंदर, किसी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ने अंदर, खुदा ने कलाम ने अंदर ये बात नहीं लिखी कि कोई ब्रिगेडियर उठा तो इतना लाशा बचा, इतना खून बचा है। दुनिया में कोई कानून नहीं है, कोई कानून नहीं है। किसी एक ने वहां पर पूरी रियासत की यरगमाल बनाओ, 4 दीवारियां पामार करो, इतना नौजवाना की मासरा करी के इतना नौजवाना की डराओ धमकाओ, ये कोई दुनिया का कानून नहीं है।
The continuing demonstrations underline a widening challenge for Pakistan. What began as local protests inside POJK has now found resonance among the Kashmiri diaspora abroad, bringing international attention to allegations of excessive force, militarization, and shrinking civic space. Protesters in Bradford had vowed to continue their campaign until, they say, military deployment is rolled back, alleged human rights violations are addressed and the voices of the people of POJK are heard. Pakistan is facing growing pressure on multiple fronts. The ongoing unrest in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, concerns over Islamabad's response to the protests, demonstrations by Baloch, Pashtun and Kashmiri diaspora groups across Europe, and continuing economic challenges have raised questions about the country's internal stability and governance. Are these isolated developments, or do they point to deeper structural challenges facing Pakistan? To discuss this, I'm joined by foreign affairs expert Mr. Rabinder Sachdev. So, welcome to Newsweek South Asia. My first question to you is, the recent unrest in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir appears different from previous protests. What began as economic grievances has evolved into demands over political representation, governance and constitutional rights. Has the nature of dissent fundamentally changed?
The nature of dissent, and not only dissent, I think expression of dissent and articulation of dissent has certainly changed in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir area as compared to protests, demonstrations of the past. The key issue is that, yes, in the past, protests used to be on issues of, prices of essential commodities, shortage of essential commodities, no electricity, and the resources being taken away from this region into other regions. But now that protest has snowballed. In addition to the grievances about the resources and the economic conditions, it has now moved on to grievances and demands for political representation or governance itself, or the constitutional arrangements themselves, for the people of the region to have a say in their governance. So this is a decided change of the demands, of the nature of the protest movements that we're seeing. And also what we are seeing is the numbers are much larger as compared to previous protests. I think after 2022, these are the largest numbers.
Islamabad designated the Joint Awami Action Committee as a terrorist organization, while Amnesty International criticized the move and raised concerns over arbitrary arrests, internet shutdowns and the use of force. Does labeling a civil protest movement as a security threat risk shrinking the space for democratic dissent?
There are definitely some breakdowns of law and order, but that does not mean that the entire organization or platform be, declared or clamped down upon as a terrorist organization. In fact, that very, very much so reduces the space for civic society participation in a democracy. By doing this, Pakistan is, I think, giving further fuel to the fire amongst the citizens, amongst the residents of the region, to express their opposition to what the federal government is doing or causing to be done in this region. So I think Pakistan is making a mistake unless you let, opposition express itself. If you suppress it, it only grows larger and larger. And down the line, I think Pakistan will pay a political price for this.
European cities are increasingly becoming venues for demonstrations involving Baloch, Pashtun and Kashmiri diaspora groups. How concerned is Islamabad likely to be that these issues are moving beyond regional politics and entering mainstream international discourse?
Pakistan always wants to keep its internal problems internal, which as any nation would want, definitely so. But the problem which Pakistan is now facing is that its own acts of policy, acts of negligence, not paying attention to the logical, reasonable demands of its citizens, has brimmed over so much that diaspora groups, be it in London, be it in Geneva, be in Brussels, are coming out on the streets. That creates a further problem for Pakistan, because you see London, Geneva, Brussels are centers of international organizations. They are centers of variety of civic society groups ranging from human rights to other rights groups. They are also home and location for politicians. For example, Brussels, you would have members of the European Parliament, in Geneva also, in London also. So when these protests are seen by such individuals, and of course the media is there in each one of these world capitals, it does create a problem for Pakistan that the narrative which it wanted to avoid, over which it wanted a blanket so that there is no mention about Baluch issues, no mention about issues in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, no discussion about Kashmir, the Pakistan side.
Can a state sustain prolonged counter-insurgency operations while implementing IMF-backed economic reforms, managing inflation, and responding to public demands for better governance? Are economic fragility and security instability now reinforcing each other?
I would say it's not even internal security. It is, let's say, internal dissent. Security they are using to suppress the dissent, right? So there's an expression of democratic, rights, which each one of these regions. And remember, Pakistan, the perception within Pakistan is that it's Punjab, the region of Punjab, the province of Punjab, and Punjabis which dominate the nation. So be it Balochistan, be it Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Pakistan needs to invest much more in counterinsurgency, in law and order, in internal security. Therefore, of course, it has a cost. And Pakistan's economy goes from one, gasp of oxygen to another gasp of oxygen by the foreign loans it gets. Pakistan has an external debt of over $90 billion. A servicing rate of even 3% soft would mean about $3 odd billion to be paid out every year, which Pakistan is not able to.
Thank you so much for giving us your time, sir.
Thank you. A pleasure to be with you.
Bangladesh is battling one of its worst monsoon emergencies this year. Days of relentless rainfall, flash floods and landslides have devastated the country's southeastern districts, claiming more than 50 lives and leaving over 1 million people stranded. From submerged villages in Chattogram to vulnerable Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, the disaster has rapidly turned into a major humanitarian crisis. A report.
Torrential monsoon rains coupled with upstream runoff and a weather depression over the Bay of Bengal have unleashed widespread flooding across southeastern Bangladesh. According to the country's Disaster Management Ministry, at least 54 people have lost their lives, while more than 1.1 million people across 10 districts have been affected by floods, landslides and waterlogging. Among the worst hit areas are Chattogram, Cox's Bazar, Bandarban, Rangamati and Khagrachari, where overflowing rivers, submerged highways and landslides have cut off entire communities. Thousands of homes remain underwater, forcing families into emergency shelters or leaving them stranded without electricity, clean drinking water or access to food. Relief operations continue, but damaged roads and washed away bridges have slowed the delivery of aid to many remote locations.
মানে আজকে 4-5 দিন ধরে পানি মানুষ বাড়ি ঘরে আসতে পারছে না, মানুষ না খেয়ে মারা যাচ্ছে, কোনো প্রতিনিধি কোনো মেম্বার চেয়ারম্যান এলাকার মধ্যে এসে কোনো খোঁজ খবর নিচ্ছে না, মানুষ যাতায়াতের সমস্যা হচ্ছে, মেইন সমস্যা হচ্ছে খাওয়ার নাই মানুষের থেকে, এরা দিনে না দিন খাই, আজকে 5 দিন ধরে কোনো জায়গায় যেতে পারছে না, ঘর ভেঙে যাচ্ছে, নদীতে পড়ে যাচ্ছে, কোনো খোঁজ খবর নিচ্ছে না।
For many survivors, the flood has become more than a natural disaster. It is now a humanitarian emergency. Entire villages remain submerged in waist-deep water, while many families have exhausted their food supplies. Humanitarian agencies warn that thousands of people cannot cook because flood waters have inundated homes, leaving neither dry space nor fuel. The crisis has been particularly severe in Cox's Bazar, home to nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees living in densely populated camps built on fragile hillsides. Floods and landslides have damaged shelters, sanitation facilities and access roads. Humanitarian agencies report more than 160 landslides and dozens of flooding incidents inside the camps, displacing thousands of refugees and further exposing women, children and elderly residents to heightened health and protection risks.
মিনিমাম প্রায় 12,500 থেকে 13,000 পর্যন্ত পরিবার পানিবন্দী এখনো সালসুসুই এবং ঘরের ভিতরে রোডগার্ডের বেহাল অবস্থা
As flood waters slowly begin to recede in some areas, the scale of destruction is becoming clearer. Homes, cropland, fisheries, businesses and critical infrastructure have suffered extensive damage. Thousands of families have lost food stocks, bedding, cooking utensils and household belongings, while many now face the daunting task of rebuilding their lives with limited resources. Humanitarian organizations including Oxfam and UN agencies have launched emergency operations providing food, safe drinking water, hygiene kits, cash assistance and shelter support while appealing for additional international funding to meet the growing needs.
আর বন্যা অবনীত প্রায় আমরা 4 দিন ধরে ওই পানি অবনীত আছে তো আমার ক্ষয়ক্ষতি প্রায় 20-30 মতন মানে 30,000 মতন আর কি তো আজকে 3-4 দিন পরে একটু পানিটা অবনীত হয়েছে ওই আমার বন্ধু বান্ধব বা প্রতিবেশী মিলে আমরা গর্ত পরিষ্কার করতেছি প্রায় আমরা এখনো কয়েকদিন ধরে খেয়ে না খেয়ে আছি খুব অবস্থা খারাপ আমরা একটু সাহায্য বা সহযোগিতা
For Bangladesh, where monsoon flooding is an annual challenge, this year's disaster has once again highlighted the growing humanitarian and climate resilience challenge facing vulnerable communities. With thousands still isolated, damaged infrastructure slowing relief efforts, and the threat of diseases looming large, the immediate priority remains reaching those still cut off with food, clean water, shelter, and medical assistance before the crisis deepens further.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views, and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.